Hey, and welcome to the Reset Podcast. Everything you need to know that your therapist probably never told you. Researched by experts, real life experiences. This is Reset. Hey everyone, we're so glad you are joining us today. Today we're going to talk about the P word.
Perfectionism.
And let's be honest, we all have that in us in different ways, different situations that arise that some people might find themselves feeling the need to achieve to that level. But let me tell you something. We have told our kids that we don't use that word in our house. And as a consequence, it's almost become a curse word. So if I ever say it, my daughter gasps so dramatically. Mommy, you said perfect.
Well, and we know with our son, especially like artwork he brings home, it's not perfect. He can't put it on the refrigerator. It's not perfect. Like it's always about like it's not perfect.
Yes.
And I don't know how they get that language.
I don't either. Well, we did have a good conversation though. I finally was asking him, what are you struggling with? This was years ago. Like, why are you so mad at this picture? And he did. He made this point. He explained it to me as I see it in my head and it's not coming out the way I want. And it really hit me like that is the same way we struggle with it, whether that's in a sport or in a relationship or in any situation, is the expectation is not met. And that's where perfectionism comes in because you feel like you didn't hit the mark.
Well, and perfectionism is one of those things that it's an intimacy killer. And I think we got to realize if you're in a relationship with someone or marry someone who's a perfectionist, you know that the perfectionist just ruins opportunity for intimacy. Or think about with work, you know, being in part of like projects of someone who's a perfectionist, it robs you of the joy. And what happens is you know, if you're with someone who's a perfectionist, they become controlling because they put so much weight and matter into the end result that if it's not done the way they want it, they just take it all and say, I got this.
Or the person on the other end just surrenders and says, then you do it. Did anybody have that parent growing up who you have this project? I feel like we all did it with like the sugar cubes or something. You made something and your parent's trying to help you, but you're a child, so it's not going to look like an adult would do it. And they're trying to help you. I remember being in situations like that and just being like, fine, then you do it. And that's why a lot of times kids would come with these projects that looked like their parent did it because their parent did do it.
Well, right. So what happens, we have a parent who's like perfectionist, right? A lot of times, you're right, they just take over the kid's project. And so that creates like, learned helplessness, it's enabling, right? And the kid just realizes there's one way to do it, mom's way or dad's way, and that's it. I can't do it that way. I'll just default to them.
Yeah, and then you actually end up discouraging the other party and making them think that they aren't able to achieve what you want, like we said, what you expected out of them.
Well, and a lot of people who are perfectionists are really concerned about, aptitude, right? They're like where they're going, their potential of who they want to be and where they want to go with either themselves or a relationship, or has to do, like I said, like project-based type stuff, right? And so the thing we got to realize is perfectionism paralyzes people's potential. And so perfectionism or perfectionist, people, right? And a lot of times what happens is they think they're actually obtaining their best version themselves. The reality of it is they're not. They're completely paralyzing their potential, either when it comes to the outcome or even when it comes to just enjoying the process of what they're doing. And a lot of times they come from this over-trying mentality. And so they're constantly over-trying, and they're going from a place of like burnout or anxiety or stress. And this is why a lot of times with perfectionism, we see a lot of, mental health characteristics, right? Like general anxiety disorder, if it's like OCD, right? And so we see things like that accompany with this, especially if it's a chronic issue for that person.
I'll never forget the first time my therapist was empathizing with me over something, and she said, it's just hard being a perfectionist at times. And I jaw to the ground dropped, like, I am not a perfectionist. Because for me, a lot of times in school, it's like, I just want to get it done. I don't care. Like, because I struggle with ADD. So it was just like, I would get to the point where I'm like, I don't even care anymore. But what she meant for me, which I never knew, perfectionism in the way I was perceived by other people. And that's where my anxiety came in. Like if I was with a certain group of people and I wanted to look like I was either as smart or as cool or as pretty or whatever it was, is I was trying so hard to hit this expectation and mark and be this person, that's where my perfectionism manifested. And like you said, that over trying mentality, oh my goodness, that was my life for so long. And that created for me an anxiety disorder because I never felt good enough.
Well, you're always in this internal battle you're talking about. The internal battle could be like what you just discussed, which is, the struggle between being genuinely who you are, right? The authentic self, or do I need to be the person who I feel other people want me to be? So perception of self, right, versus actual self, right? And so there's just that constant battle. For some people, it's more of they struggle with like this internal battle of being productive, right, and being perfect. And their mind, being perfect is being productive. We're trying to say, and the reality of it is, being perfect is not productive. In many ways, they have struggled. They take way too long to achieve things they want to take that shouldn't take as long. Think about kids with homework. Like we've had this with their own son, right? Where the aspect of he will rip up the homework or, ruin it on purpose so we can't see
He
it.
just did that yesterday.
Yeah. And, that comes from this aspect of he's delaying the end because in his mind it's not perfect. So something that should only take, let's say, per se 20 minutes. Can you take up towards 40 minutes, right? And of course, he has what we call a tantrum at his age, but adults have tantrum, and there could be internal tantrums, and there could just be an aspect of just, throwing hands in the air and just being upset with ourselves, right? And that's what happens. There's a delay of achievement that occurs when it comes to perfectionism.
That's such a great point because perfectionism is really just pursuing a lie, and it is this distortion of ourselves, and it's this lie that we think we're doing what people expect, right? So it becomes a defense mechanism. And in a weird way, I don't even know if this fits in. You can tell me this is for a different time, Kristen. But as a child, because I struggled, I was always the funny one and always the in case I tripped or messed up, I didn't want to ever look like I messed up. So I put on this front that I'm just the weird, funny, silly one. So when I trip, it makes sense because I'm kind of the clown and hyper and weird. But internally, that was totally a defense mechanism because then I would come home and be my true self, which really wasn't this hyper crazy weirdo kid. But I put this front up so that I didn't mess up in front of anybody. But it was just Kristen being Kristen, Does that make sense?
Yeah, but you bring a good point, which is perfectionism is a defense mechanism, right? It can be a defense mechanism from failure. I don't want to feel the pain or the suffering that could occur from trying, and then all of a sudden it doesn't go the way I want. It could be defense mechanism of embarrassment, fear of embarrassment.
So would that be a example of perfectionism?
100%.
Okay.
Right? And it could be a defense mechanism from, some people say that, they have a fear of success, right? And the responsibility of success.
Yes.
And so what happens is then the defense mechanism, perfectionism, is really a self-sabotaging tool, right? I never achieve that. Since I never achieved that, then I have to take on the weight of that success or the responsibility of it.
Wow.
And so you see where it can become an unhealthy, right, relationship with self, unhealthy relationship with our performance self, right? And it's this, all or nothing mental trap that occurs. And it really comes from, a mindset of having the inability to tolerate a lack of control in life. That I have to feel like I need control. And so they're controlling something, whether it's the result, whether it's a person, or perception. This is something where you got to go a little bit deeper, right? This is where you guys start really thinking existentially, like, why is this? What is it getting from me? Like, what is it getting for me? Why am I doing this? Is this something that's been taught? Is this something that has been, natured? Like something that's just part of my temperament that I'm just born with, right? And sometimes we see it with like OCD tendencies, right? And things like that. But other times it could come from something else, like parenting. Think about it, you have like authoritarian parent. The parent that's just really hard on you, my way or the highway, right? All you want to do is be loved and accepted by that parent. And maybe the only time you ever see that love and acceptance from them is when you actually do great or you do ideal, whether that's on a field in athletics, the arts, right? Or academics, the triple A's as I call it, you know, and in that area, right? It's the only time I see them is when I have a certain GPA, right? And sometimes parents don't do this. They don't realize they do this on not on purpose, but on accident, right? We start talking about numbers like GPA and things like that, you know. I always think about my own childhood where my parents, I mean, we talk about this. My parents didn't care about grades, right? They care more about character. They care more about work ethic, right? There was something back in, you know, I don't know, should they do this anymore? I don't see with our kids, but they used to have a mark for citizenship, right? And I remember my parents would be like, "Did you get the O's on citizenship?"
Outstanding.
Right? Outstanding is right.
Congratulations, son. You failed math, but your character is amazing. And although good character will reflect, grades don't have to be all A's, but, you know, at least you, hopefully you tried. If you got a C as long as you tried. Is that what your mom cared about, right?
Right. Well, and you know, citizenship didn't get me into Stanford. It got me to a junior college. So
congratulations.
Congratulations.
Oh my gosh, I'm so proud of you. Nothing wrong with that.
I think that's the message that could come across is the aspect of how we handle performances in our own lives, models it for people around us, including our kids, and how we approach our parenting style around performances as well can even develop and create a perfectionist mentality or complex or even like a certain ego.
Yeah.
Right? And so I think just recognizing that is so important.
Like I'm only loved and accepted when I do it, act a certain way, look a certain way, perform a certain way. That's a lot of weight to carry.
Well, and you think about that right there, right? So at times that could create such a high ideal self, right? Where it's probably not obtainable, right? And so in social psychology, you have this concept of your actual self and then your ideal self. So we're always pursuing our ideal self, where that is in our mind, right? But the larger the gap is from who you are today, your actual self, and then your ideal self, technically we say that you're very unhealthy, you're an unhealthy self. Usually that's more depression, more anxiety, more worry, just having an unhealthy relationship with who you are and that kind of stuff, right? But if we're able to narrow that gap, more that gap is narrowed, right? Then usually that person has a healthier sense of self, who they are, right? And joy of life and that kind of stuff, right? And so what happens with the perfectionism, what could happen, and we see is that their actual self is so far away, it's not even obtainable, right? That the person is constantly just running, burning out to get to that, to narrow that gap, right? That they could never pursue it in a way that could achieve it, which means they're constantly just unhappy.
I love that visual. So then basically you're taking that, you need to take that ideal self and either bring it down to something obtainable or realize your strengths and what you're really good at and self-talk and push up your actual self. Is that what you're kind of saying?
Yeah, and I wouldn't say like I like to use the words terms of I just think you just readjust where you're at, where your ideal self is.
Yeah.
Right. And maybe it's creating expectations that are somewhat obtainable, but far enough away where you're continuing chasing it, where you could channel that.
You do want to always grow and learn and get better.
100%. But then it also allows the actual self to pursue something and achieve forward, to advance forward, since a lot of happiness occurs when we do advance forward in something. Because it does feel good.
Yeah, absolutely.
To accomplish things and to do things a certain way and to see results in a certain way. But we're talking about there's this chronic aspect in the mind that it's never good enough. And I think that's what happens with the perfectionist mentality.
Yeah.
Is that it's never good enough. It's the results in burnout and that kind. Again, go ahead. You gave me this look. What's the look?
I have a question for you.
Oh, okay.
So
here we are.
What is the opposite of perfectionism?
It's a great question. So the opposite of perfectionism is not imperfection. I think a lot of people think, oh, it's imperfection. The opposite of perfectionism is actually freedom.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And so it's the freedom of giving yourself permission to move forward or to go without fear, to say yes to something that is hard, right? To face failure, to move beyond it, whatever it may be, right? It's just giving yourself that permission to go ahead and move forward on it, right? I think a lot about just in my freshman year of high school, I was probably 5'0" and I really loved basketball.
Me too, babe. Me too.
You see my posters from back in the day. It's all Michael Jordan, Larry Bird. I'm nowhere close to that. And so I wasn't going to make the basketball team. So I'm like, what's the point of trying out? I'm not going to make the team, right? And I just think about how important it was that my parents came around me and said, no, you're going to try out. You never know. And I remember them saying, you never know, but also just do it anyways, just because it'd be good for you. I don't know what that means, right? But then you go try out. I didn't make the team, and back in the day, right? They put the list on the locker room where you had to go there and find it. You check it 5 times, realize you didn't make it. But what is happening there? A lot of things. I think in terms of is building up muscles of disappointment in me. I think it's putting myself in a situation where, I knew I'm not going to fail, but can I muscle up enough energy and ethic and a certain mindset
you said you weren't going to.
Yeah, I wasn't going to. Yeah, no, yeah, I knew I wasn't going to make it. But be able to go there and perform, right, in spite of what the expectations are in my mind, what I want versus the reality of it. I mean, there's a lot of lessons that was taught through that, right, without knowing it, right? Plus, also, I channeled that energy to put in another sport that I move forward on. Right. And so sometimes it's recognizing, I was thinking about, as a man and a woman, you're as strong as you admit to your weaknesses. Right. And so sometimes I know my weakness in that case was basketball. I'm not going to make the team, but I didn't keep that from me actually pursuing it until I finally got the final word that I didn't make the list. Right.
But I mean, you're pretty great in the driveway. When we're playing like horse and stuff. I mean,
I dominate at home.
You do dominate. Like Sawyer will ask me to play with him so he can win. Because he's pretty good, too. I feel like when you come out, he's like, oh, are we playing for points?
The best is
So I just want to say congratulations.
Yeah, well,
you are very athletic, and you can shoot a great basket.
Let me tell you, when the basket is 6 foot tall in our front yard, and your son says, Dad, can you dunk? And I said, yes. And then when he dunk, he still thinks that the basketball hoop on TV
is the same
as that, and he's like,
Dad, you're so cool.
Dad, you are Michael Jordan, and that is true.
Oh, I love it. Okay, so how do we know then if we're someone who has a perfectionist mindset, right? So what are some questions we could ask ourselves that we could just be more aware and just start giving ourselves some more grace and start realizing, maybe we have set the bar too high for ourselves.
Yeah, here's some things to think about. Maybe take some notes on this if you're listening of, is this me, right? And I think the first thing here is, am I more concerned with achieving than enjoying? Am I more concerned about achieving something than enjoying the process or the system that I'm working around or working in, right? And if you're so concerned about achieving, the joy is gone.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think that's a great question to ask yourself. I think another one is, do I spend too much time trying to avoid mistakes instead of playing and exploring and having fun?
Oh my gosh, that
right?
was me as a kid. It breaks my heart thinking back.
Childhood version of you does break my heart as well at times. I'm not gonna lie.
I was a happy kid though, but when I look back, I did have a lot of anxiety of I would, like, if we were playing kickball at school, I would go home and practice and make sure I didn't look like a fool in front of everybody. Like, that's crazy when I look back.
But I also think that's also healthy to, like I say, you recognize your weakness and you practice each challenge.
That's true. I just didn't want to look stupid, though.
Right.
I look like a fool.
I don't think anyone wants to look stupid, for sure.
But instead of just playing or exploring, like, I missed the ball in front of everyone. Well, I'm just exploring.
Yeah, I think another way to put it is like this, is, it's okay to play things you're not great at.
Yeah, it's okay to learn, like, not know
things.
something.
Right, and that's what we try to teach our own children. I think another one here is, do my thoughts include words like must and should or shouldn't or always or never, right? Or maybe you tell yourself phrases like I have to or ought to. These are all type of, like, absolute statements, right? And so I bring this up because our self-talk is like authoring our story. Right. We are our own narrative. And those words a lot of times accompany with someone who has a perfectionist mindset.
Okay. I love what you just said. I've never heard you say this. You said our thoughts author the narrative of our own story. Wow. Put that on a bumper sticker, somebody. That is such a beautiful way of thinking of that, because I am someone who struggles with my self-talk. But whoa, like, I'm narrating my own story in my mind. What is the narrator saying?
I think that's we need to do a little merch drop on that one.
Yeah.
Do we need merch drop it?
Who wants to sponsor us?
Please contact us. Anyways, I also think, someone who is their worth and value based on end results and when other people think, right?
That's a huge one.
Right. Meaning that, they judge themselves by other people's standards.
So basically social media.
Yeah, you think about this, like social media has, we're talking about this at a different time, the aspect of the of the social validation cycle that social media does, right? That you're always in this loop of trying to be validated as much as you can, right? And so, which basically means that you give all of your audience the control to say how worthy or value you are. You know, there's something called internal versus external locus of control. And so external locus of control is basically this concept in which, you know, my worth and values depend on how people tell me I am, right? Or basically even like my results, the feedback from others, feedback from let's say even like grades, right? Like from an institution. The internal locus of control is more about the internal value, like what I believe myself, my core values, my belief system, who I am. So I have control of that value, or I've controlled that opportunity to, you know, turn it on as much as I want, right? So if someone comes in and says, I really do not like you, or I don't like how you dunked that ball, or something like that, right? I know internally who I am as a basketball player, right? And so I know and I trust that. And so I don't allow that to affect me in the way I could hear, let's say, like criticism, things like that. And I recognize like that's not a mark of my character. It's just a temporary setback, right? And so it gives me that sense of value versus the external locus of control is someone says something to me and I take it as a mark of my character and I hold on to that and I'm thinking about it days later or hours later. And then is that person even thinking about it? They don't care, right? And so that's why it's important to, to think in terms of, condition, is my worth condition? Is my sense of being conditioned on others? That's scary because that could create even a codependency.
Super scary, man.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
This is the part of our show where we talk about our opinions on the things that we observe. Observe and then respond, don't worry, you cannot be wrong. It's all about the way that your mind works. Observation feedback.
So, we took our first trip to Dollywood. Jolene.
Which I will tell you, I'll give you my opinions like I like to do in these segments. And,
well, that's what these segments
are.
Well,
they are.
Babe.
And I know this is Joe Unleash, as you call it.
Oh, dear.
And,
I do get worried.
But, we brought our kids and we want them to experience roller coasters. And tip it, I don't do roller coasters. Never have, never will.
We get into Dollywood. We go on a ride with my parents and Joe. So it's like it's a pretty decent little roller coaster. Not too fast, nice. The one right next door to it, our daughter was tall enough. 48 inches was the height. And I'm like, let's go on. I didn't read about it. I didn't know about it. Comes to find out, I didn't even tell you this. I ran into one of our friends and she had said that it is one of the most insane roller coasters in the country.
The world.
The one that I brought our children on. 70 miles per hour, she said, not 60. 100-foot drop. And it's like, it looks like an old wooden one. So I was thinking, it can't be that fast. It's like Thunder Mountain Railroad at Disneyland. Oh my goodness. I felt like the worst mom in the entire universe.
So let me get straight to the point.
Get straight to the point.
I'm watching them on there and I noticed that my daughter's screaming her head off and my son head is down, flopping around like a bobblehead, and he's passed out.
It's true.
And then it goes around again. And I'm seeing him, and he's white as a ghost, still passed out as can be. He comes walking out, barely stumbling from this thing. And the kid, if you know, Modern Family with Phil, when he went on the roller coaster, if not YouTube that's hilarious. That was him, passed out.
So I did research this, though, because I was a little concerned, like, oh my gosh, our kid passed out. It is something that can happen because of a few things. One, your adrenaline is out of control. You're fearful. You're not breathing correctly on roller coasters. That's why it's actually great to either laugh or scream, because you have to breathe in again after you're screaming. So all of this mixed in with the speed and what do you call it? I don't know, the pressure of when you're falling, like passing out can happen. And he even told me, like, Mommy, I feel like I'm going to pass out. I feel like I'm going to. And then he was quiet for a while. And I can't even turn around. I'm in front of them. They wanted me in front of them because it's so fast. I feel like my neck's going to break. I felt like the worst mom in the whole world.
So here's my observational feedback.
Okay, thank you.
Watching it, observing it, is those who didn't pass out, they were either screaming, right? Or they would move their head slightly to the left or the right to give them opportunity to breathe. And so our poor son has head straight up, and he said he couldn't breathe, right? And so I just told him, if you just go a little bit to the right with your head, a little bit to the left with your head, the air will go in your nostrils and you can breathe. So what's the whole point of this, right? The whole point of it is, I was telling my son, everything's a lesson, as you know with me, is just like in life, if we just pivot just a little bit or change our perspective or kind of move our sights just a little bit, we can feel like we could breathe a little more, right? And we have an opportunity to not pass out.
An opportunity to not pass out.
Yeah.
I love that. Write that one down.
Yes, but here's, to me, that wasn't the crazy part about Dollywood. And I'd love to do a Dollywood versus Disneyland segment. But here's the crazy part about, we're used to Disney. Like, we were born and raised. You worked there, you know.
That's true.
Yeah. And, you get checked when you go there.
What's the first thing you do? You go through the metal detector.
You get checked. They want to make sure you have nothing going on in your backpacks, right? Nothing's there, right? We go to Dollywood, we could buy knives and swords and carry them around, and they make them there.
You could have a personal knife forged.
Yes. And so our son bought a knife. So I'm thinking he bought this pretty good, like 4-inch blade. I'm thinking,
spring thing.
Right. And I'm thinking, we're just going to pick this up at the end. They're not going to let us carry this around. They gave it to him in the whole park. He was flipping it in and out. Like he's like a greaser from the movie. What's that movie with, oh my gosh, with Pony Boy?
Grease? Oh, Outsiders.
Outsiders. Yes. He belonged on Outsiders with this knife and line and everything. What park? Where are we at?
We're in the South now, baby.
We're in the South. And the South sells weapons.
It was a jolly old time. We were laughing so hard. This is because we always let our kids pick out one thing, like within reason of price. And that's what he picked out. I was like, this is great. Your souvenir is a knife. I can't believe this. Coming from Disneyland.
Can I mention too, just real quick, I know this might not be appropriate, but there's a certain fashion in Dollywood.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's the true Southern fashion. Jean shorts haven't gone away.
Jean shorts with cargo pockets.
With cargo pockets. That was something we saw often. Mm-hmm. And I don't know what's going on with the kids these days. I say this, I work with a lot of kiddos. It's some reason in the South, they like to put their hat really tight where it's barely on their head.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't know what that look is for.
I think it's a teen thing.
I don't know. It's just, I just feel like the South they're stuck in the 90s. Like when 89 meant 90.
The 90s and 80s are back, though. In fashion.
They don't know it's back. And then here's the other part. This is my last little fashion observation was, and I told you this, I pointed out, I go, why are people here? They love wearing T-shirts of like performers.
Yes.
Like Johnny Cash or Dolly Parton.
All musicians.
Yeah, all musicians
I saw
performing.
Yeah.
Yes, like Britney. Yes, there was some Britney Spears, and
We're in Music City.
Were we? We're in Knoxville,
Tennessee,
Smoky Mountains.
That's true. Yeah. Well, but I will say a great observation. The food at Dollywood was
fantastic.
Very, very good compared to Disneyland food. I mean, we love our churros and our pretzels, but like meal food is what I'm talking about.
Yeah, and here's my quick observation versus Disneyland. Dollywood was cheaper, great food, cheaper food. Everyone there was extremely nice, including
crazy nice,
including the people who were at the park attending the park. Yes. Right, the lines were not as long at all. No. Right,
the most we waited
smaller,
was 20 minutes.
Yeah, smaller park to do everything in a matter of 4 to 6 hours. Absolutely right. The parking was easy and simple and great. Right, everything was just dialed in, and I would say I would give it a 10 out of 10.
Wow.
Because instead of churros, which I was missing and was upset about, although their soft pretzels were amazing. Great. I love my soft pretzels.
Oh, I know what you're about to say right now.
The bread.
The cinnamon bread.
You take it over.
Oh, that's all that I wanted being there was maybe to ride a ride and get some cinnamon bread. Dolly, you did it again. You're just incredible. Dolly, we just want to thank you for your park, for your cinnamon bread, for allowing us to make memories.
And to buy knives.
And to buy knives.
And allowing our kids to pass out on a ride.
Now back to the show.
Do you overly get upset when you don't get the result you're wanting?
Yeah, when something didn't go.
Yeah, I was just
the way
thinking about
you
our son, the
expected or
tantrum,
wanted.
right? Yeah. So, I mean, it's okay to be upset and like a little like, but we're talking about the overreaction. You've seen it before, the punch in the wall, right? Or just having a little, the tantrum, we've seen it.
And it could be something small. I don't even want to say this is small, but something like, you planned a date and it didn't go the way you wanted to,
100%.
to something more extreme, like in your career or extracurricular activity or whatever it is. But yeah, there are certain things where it's almost like, I almost see it as a meter, like a barometer because I know I can overreact, be reactive. And so I always have to like pause and think, at what speed do I need to react to this? Is this something that I need to really
right? Or
freak out about?
it's just a 10 out of 10 when it really shouldn't be. Or
which we tell our son a lot, like, this is really not a level 10 problem. You're allowed to feel upset, like be frustrated, but on the ground tantrum is because you can't spell this word is really not
right.
Like,
Or we
appropriate.
use I like when we use colors. You're acting like a red.
Yeah.
I mean, it really should be like a yellow or green. Like,
Because yellow's the best.
it is. And lastly here, I think too, is I think someone who feels vulnerable when they're not in control. And because I go back to perfectionism has an aspect of control, right? And if you're someone who feels vulnerable and don't like that feeling, right, when you're not in control, then that's something that probably can feed or fertilize perfectionist thinking or doing.
That really helps me think about perfectionism, to be honest with you, thinking about the idea of control, because I never really thought about it until, like I had said, I had gone through this realization in my own life. It really helps you think of perfectionism differently, because I think I always thought it was just people who felt like they had to achieve perfectly. But when you look at it from that control point of view, it really helps us think there are areas in our lives I need to just relinquish that control.
Right. I think a lot of times I think perfectionism is one of those things that is perceived as like, let's say, like everything's in order, like OCD. I was thinking in my head just watching season 2 of The Home Edit, which is one of those shows where, oddly enough, I don't know. I feel like I don't like it, but yeah, I'm obsessed with it. And I don't know why.
It gives you a lot of mixed feelings.
Because it's the opposite of me, like when they do the garage or they do like,
I love that.
I know.
I'm the organized one.
Yeah. And I just think, I just watch that. I'm like, I'm not sure I could be married to one of those. When, people who need
You kind
that.
of are married to one of those, but
know,
I have
it's
learned to
true.
just let it go. I try to tell you, though, my brain is so chaotic that if my surroundings aren't chaotic, it helps me. Like, not
Well, they
feel
talk
as
about
out
that
of
a lot.
control.
Well, I think there's a lot of science behind that too, where
Yeah.
your situation does dictate your disposition.
Yeah.
So if you're in a chaotic, area or just seems chaos.
Yeah. But not overreacting to you didn't put it back in the right place. I've learned I'll just put it back. Like you tried to pick up. That's not where that goes. So I just go and put it where I want it.
Oh, that's my issue. I don't care where it goes.
Well, right. That's what I'm saying is I've had to learn. When you look at these shows, I think you're thinking I can never be married to someone who is always like that. I like to keep things ordered, but I've had to learn in my own personality to also let things go.
Well,
There's a beautiful little like tango.
Well, and this might be and I also think here's what I think. I watch shows. I don't know. I may stop analyzing things. What happens if you're colorblind? Does it matter?
Well, you
How
can't do the rainbow system then, Joe. You do something else.
That's what I was thinking too. What is the system? Is it grayscale at that point?
Thanks so much for hanging out with us. For more information and other resources, visit us at theresetgroup.com and make sure to follow us at The Reset Group on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok.